No trace, just some shed fur and paw prints in the snow leading back into the woods. He stood in the doorway for a long time, his breath curling in the cold, wondering if any of it had really happened. He knelt slowly, fingertips touching the faint outline of a paw print pressed into the melted crust of snow just beyond the doorway. It hadn't been a dream. Sorry for the interruption. Before we continue with the story, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much. The fur tangled in the blanket was real. The bowls still licked clean. Something sacred had passed through his life and vanished before it could be fully held. That day he didn't light the fire. He sat instead in silence, staring at the door as though expecting them to come back. But the Bobcats were wild. They had returned to their world, and he remained in his two separate worlds that had for a moment touched like threads in the wind. Spring came slowly and carefully. Buds pushed from branches, and the river cracked its icy surface. The air got softer, smelling faintly of wet pine and thawed soil. William started hiking again, his camera hanging over one shoulder. He hadn't felt like taking pictures in years, but something had changed. The camera became less of a tool and more of an excuse to look closely, to stay alert, to be present. He started looking for signs of the Bobcats. Scanning the trees and ridges, sometimes he found tracks, just barely visible dents in the softening mud or faint claw marks carved into old bark. Once a tuft of golden fur caught on a bush near the bend of the stream. Another time, droppings near a dent he hadn't noticed before. But never the cats themselves. They stayed hidden like memories half remembered but deeply felt. Still, William felt them watching. When he sat on a fallen log to drink from his water bottle, the hairs on his neck would stand up. When he took a photo of a quiet clearing, he sometimes sensed he was being studied from the bushes. He spoke out loud during those hikes. Now, quietly and without expecting an answer. "I'm doing fine," he would say. "Thanks for visiting or just missed you." Then one afternoon in early July, William wandered deeper than usual, following the rise of a narrow ridge. The day was unusually quiet. No bird songs, no rustling, just the crunch of his boots and the click of his camera strap. He reached a jagged slope covered with gravel and loose stones. As he started going down, his boot caught on a slippery patch, and he stumbled, arms waving. He slid, hitting rock and ice and dirt, landing hard against a cold rock face. Pain shot through his leg like fire. A groan escaped his lips, loud, and he tried to stand, but his ankle gave out under him with a sickening crack, maybe broken, definitely not just a sprain. The pain was sharp and merciless. He crawled to the nearest tree, dragging his injured leg behind him. Every breath hurt. He propped himself up and pulled his coat tight, eyes scanning the horizon. No phone, no signal, and no one knew where he was. His heart sank slowly into his stomach. The temperature dropped as the sun began its quiet descent behind the ridge. Shadows spilled across the snow like spilled ink, cold and creeping. William forced himself to stay awake. He slapped his cheeks, rubbed his arms, fought the pull of sleep that came too easily with shock. Then, just as he began drifting from pain and cold, a rustling came from the bushes. Sharp, deliberate, not wind, not a squirrel. His heart jumped. He turned his head weakly. It was her, the mother bobcat. She stood a few feet away, silent as snowfall, her fur glinting faintly in the dying light. Behind her, two younger bobcats waited, lean and watchful. Not quite cubs anymore. Not quite adults. She stepped forward slow and measured, sniffing the air, her gaze fixed on him. Then she turned and started walking away, but stopped to look back at him. William didn't move. He couldn't, but his lips parted slightly, his breath catching. She came back, circled him once like a cat circling prey, but there was no hunger in her body language, only purpose. Then she trotted off again, this time faster. With intention, He wasn't sure how long he sat there after she disappeared. The minutes blurred, filled only with the ache in his leg and the distant echo of paws in the snow. He closed his eyes once, maybe twice, struggling to stay conscious. Then a sound. Low at first, mechanical, faint. Within 2 hours, the sound of distant engines broke the silence. Then closer voices, footsteps crunching snow, shouted names, crackling radios. Then shapes appeared through the trees. 2 rescue workers in bright orange gear moving fast, eyes scanning. "William Carter, we got a call from the ranger station." One of them said some hikers spotted animal tracks circling this area strangely and they thought something was wrong. One knelt beside him, checking his pulse, wrapping a thermal blanket around his shoulders. William couldn't find the words. He was too tired to speak, but his eyes drifted toward the ridge where the Bobcat had stood, where she had waited, where she had turned back once to make sure he saw her. She was gone. Back at the cabin, leg wrapped and crutches leaning beside his chair. William thought often of that moment. He never told anyone the full truth. The hikers had seen tracks, yes, but the rescue team only found him because those tracks had led directly to him and looped again and again like a beacon. And he knew it wasn't a coincidence. Those weren't random animal prints. They were deliberate, circular, persistent. It was as though she had drawn a map in the snow circling his fallen body, like punctuation on a sentence she had waited months to write, and somehow someone had read it. Each night after that, as the pain in his leg faded and the bruises turned yellow and green before disappearing, he would close his eyes and see her face again. Sharp, intelligent, ancient, the face of something wild and dignified that had weighed him, measured him, and just once decided he was worth saving. August came bright and rich. The forests buzzed with life, birds nested, elk returned to the meadows. Warm winds blew through the trees, and the scent of pine mixed with wild flowers and damp earth. William moved more easily now, still slow, but no longer wincing with every step. He spent his mornings walking the trails closest to home. Not far, just far enough to smell the world changing around him. He sat often on his porch with a notebook balanced on one knee, sketching the shape of the mother bobcat from memory, every line in her face, every ripple of her muscles. He wasn't an artist by any stretch, but the need to remember her truthfully felt like an act of gratitude. Sometimes he caught himself smiling without meaning to, lost in the image of her staring through the kitchen window that first night, torn between instinct and hope. There were other signs, too. Once he found a half-eaten rabbit near the steps, neatly killed, not torn apart. Another time, his wood pile had been disturbed. Paw prints leading in and out. She never stayed, but she had come close again, and that was enough. They were reminders, he liked to think, small messages. "We're still here, we remember." One evening, just before dusk, as the sky turned the color of old golden shadows bled from the trees like ink, he looked up from his notebook and froze. Across the clearing, just beyond the reach of the trees, she stood once more, healthy, strong, and poised. Her fur shimmered in the last light of day. She wasn't alone. Her 2 young, now nearly grown, flanked her, taller than before. More filled out, but still unmistakable. One had a faint mark above the left eye. The same cub that had first leaned into his palm by the fire. The other crouched low, ears twitching, alert. She stared at William, not with fear, not with aggression, but with knowing. He rose slowly, pressing one hand to the porch rail. He didn't raise his voice, didn't move any closer, just stood in her presence, letting silence speak. "Thank you," he whispered so quietly the words barely escaped his lips. In that moment, everything else fell away. The years, the loneliness, the dull ache of age. All that remained was this. One man, 3 wild creatures, and a memory made real again. No movement, no sound. Then a flick of her tail, a signal. She turned and vanished into the trees, her children behind her, graceful and silent as ever. William stood long after they had gone, his hands still resting on the wood. The sky faded from gold to gray, the first stars blinking alive above the treetops. But he didn't go inside. He wasn't ready to close the door on the evening. He felt something shift again in his chest. Not pain, not grief, something freer, something like belonging. He had saved her children. She had saved him. And the forest, the wild, had witnessed it all. Did you enjoy this story? Would you have helped those freezing cubs? Let us know in the comments below. If you like the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Kindness always comes back to you. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.